I want to talk you through the 10 steps I use to create processes. And thought the best place to start would be with one of my worst moments ever as a dad. My wife was out of town. Of course, my wife was out of town when this happened, right? All of the adults had left the room, so to speak. Anyway, I'm on my way to meet my friend Nick for dinner with his kids, and I think, but I'll stop in the local park and I'll get in my run. I'll be super dad. So, get to the park. I take out my stroller, which is a hand me down stroller and not a jogging stroller. I put in my 5 laps, look at the time, and I think, oh, I need to hustle on this last lap because I don't want to keep Nick waiting. So pick up my pace a little bit. Everything was going great. Everything was fine until I come to the little bridge you can kind of see there in the picture. There was maybe a 1 or 2 inch difference between the asphalt running path or walking path and the bridge. And the first 5 times, everything was great. It wasn't until the sixth time, the last time, and maybe it was because I was in a hurry, but wasn't until that sixth time that I caught the lip of the bridge just wrong, and I flipped the stroller with my 2 kids in it over, and then I fell on top of the stroller. Yay. So I roll off, and one of my kids is screaming. I rush to get the stroller back up. And my youngest at the time, my poor boy, was just wailing. So I squat down and I get him disentangled from the straps. I set him on my leg, and this teenage couple walks over and they start arguing. The girl says to the guy, "Do something." And the guy says, "I don't know what to do." And no joke, they sat there arguing maybe 4 feet away from me. They didn't actually help. So while I'm holding my son with one arm, I'm trying to unbuckle my daughter, who did not have a scratch on her, wasn't saying a word, unbuckle her with the other arm, finally get her out. I break down the stroller and I'm limping back to the car with my daughter walking, holding my son. Teenage couple had never spoken a word to me. And I look back, they're still arguing. Yeah, that relationship wasn't going to work out. I look down at my son and he looks up at me and he smiles. And that smile's like, "It's okay, Dad." And when he smiles, his teeth are just bright red. He's just got blood all in his teeth. And I've thought about that moment often. It's a perfect image of a business that has outgrown its systems. A stroller flipped over, the owner of the stroller has fallen on top, and the babies have gotten hurt. And I just can't help but think, when you've outgrown your systems, you can't just put more effort in. Just running faster, working harder doesn't produce better results at that point. And the timeline was a problem too. Like my wife later, oh, I should tell you that I didn't tell my wife about this little accident until she got back. And when she got back, when we were talking about it, she was like, "Why didn't you just walk? Why did you have to run?" Well, I wanted to be super dad. I wanted to put forth the extra effort, but just the extra effort, tighter timelines, that just puts more stress in the system. And as you begin to think about upgrading your systems, I want to point your attention to a couple of competing values I had that day in the park. On the one hand, I really wanted to make progress. I wanted to get a workout in. I wanted to take good care of my health. That's a good thing, right? Stewarding your health, good thing. Meanwhile, it wasn't enough to just walk. I wanted to run. I wanted to make my workout excellent. And I have found specifically when you are upgrading your processes that if you insist on doing it with excellence right at the beginning, excellence actually blocks your progress. If I had walked in the park that day, no one would have gotten hurt, me or Theo, my son. Everything would have been fine. I would have gotten a little workout in, and that incremental progress would have been okay. So I would encourage you as you think about beginning to upgrade your processes so that you can expand the potential in your business. I would encourage you to approach the process of process capture with a value for imperfection. So if you want to have more income, more impact, more free time, I would encourage you to think, how do I do this imperfectly? My background is in writing, and a lot of the thinking that I have brought to business and certainly to processes, I imported from a lot of writing stuff. Hemingway said this, and there's truth in this, that if you just get it down first and you give yourself permission to produce crap first, you can eventually get to something that's excellent. In his case, a farewell to arms. But your goal, right when you sit down, isn't the excellent processes. Your goal is an imperfect product. Your goal is to take messy, imperfect action. So, with that in mind, I would encourage you right out of the gate to just say, I'm going to do this imperfectly, knowing that I'm going to improve these imperfect processes over time. I'm going to edit these drafts over time. All the quality will come in the edit. Here are the 10 steps. Feel free to take a screenshot. I said that you can do them in 92 minutes, and that's true. I think it will be possible to capture a process in 92 minutes after you work through some of the other steps that I'll show you. Speaking of, step one, make a drawing. You need to be able to wrap your mind around your business operations as a whole. What are all the moving parts? The way I did that was by first drawing two boxes. One of my boxes is growth. It will be for you too. And growth encompasses both marketing and sales. Your other main box will be fulfillment. How do you do the work? Once you have those two boxes, you can start to fill in the other things. Now, it's worth pointing out that your systems are made up of processes. Your processes are made up of sub processes. Maybe some of your processes have phases. So, for example, if you look at the fulfillment system I have in this drawing, some of the phases are onboarding, planning, production, delivery, and even offboarding, which you see at the bottom. So, your systems are made up of processes. Processes are made up of sub processes and phases. You'll go through steps in those processes and you'll use tools to run those processes. So, like I said, your business operations has a lot of moving parts. Just try to make a drawing of the moving parts at first. And already, some of you will be thinking, yeah, like, I'm not going to do that. Please don't skip this step. Do not skip this step. Going back to the Hemingway example from earlier, you have to get the draft down first. You have to define first so that you can refine later. The quality comes in the edit. So my drawing became this. I brought the refinement later. And then once I had this, the second or third or fourth version, I'm able to look at that and say, what am I missing? We'll get to that more in a second. Step two, and it doesn't necessarily have to take you 15 minutes. Step two, create a document where links to all of your processes can live. If you already have processes, you may already have this doc. If so, maybe you can skip this step. But here's what my document, where all of my links to processes live, looks like in Notion. I call the document my master business system. You'll see I even have some definitions here. I use toggle lists in Notion to more neatly organize things. You don't have to do that. Again, all the quality comes in the edit. But just to start with, create a place where your processes can live. Then you move on to step three. Which processes do you need right now? The time frame or time boxing here is really important. Of course, you could dream about 3 years in the future when you want all sorts of different processes. That's not what you're focused on here. You're thinking, what processes do I need right now? Which process would it have been nice to have last Thursday or this morning? Just do some brainstorming. Again, the goal here is messy, imperfect action, not even a comprehensive list of what you might like to have right now. You can see when I went through this brainstorming exercise, I really only came up with about 9 or 10 bullet points. So do some brainstorming. Once you've done the brainstorming, now you can go back and look at that list and say, well, you know, let me order those in terms of most important to least important. I typed up my list in Notion. This is not a bad idea because later, as I begin to create more processes, I already have my list of needed processes saved. And it's pretty easy for me to create a new Notion doc, make the process there, link out to it here, reorganize it. I get some efficiency back. So make sure that your brainstorming finds its way over to that master doc you created. Next, this is the fastest step of all of them. Pick the priority. For me, that priority was quarterly launches for my freelance cake community. I sat down, and as I was prioritizing my own list of processes, I thought, well, what's the one thing that would make all of the other things easier or, less important or unnecessary? And I realized, wow, if I had my launch process codified, crystallized, that would make things easier, which brings up an important point. Only one process can be most important right now. So if you look at your lists, only one process in that list can be most important. If you look at them and none of them are most important, you might want to put a little bit more thought into it. But once you have that single most important process right now, you'll want to give it a name that will make it easy to find in a year. My tendency when I finally get gung ho and find some energy to capture processes, my tendency is to treat the name as an afterthought. I'll just put in a placeholder name, something like August community launch dash new checklist. Let me put in a placeholder and then I'll get down to the real business of writing out the steps because that feels like progress. Just naming the thing doesn't feel like progress. I would encourage you to slow down just for a minute or two and force yourself to think of a more searchable and intuitive name that will make it easy for you to find this process later. So when I do this, I think, how does my brain work? Knowing that I'll need to find this later, what should I call it? And my name ended up being a mouthful, but it will be easy for me to find it later. Freelance Cake Community Launch Process. Okay. And I'll tack the date on at the end, 2025. So make sure you give all of your processes intuitive, searchable names. Here's another step, number 7, that you might be tempted to bypass. Summarize the desired outcome in 2 sentences. You're like, nah, I just want to go straight into making the sawdust fly by writing down the steps. Slow down there, partner. Hold on. There are 2 reasons why it's worth it to go ahead and force yourself to articulate the desired outcome. Number 1, if you have any plans whatsoever, even in the distant future, of building out a team, you can't expect current or future team members to know what a successful outcome looks like for all of your processes. You may need to tell them. You can't expect them to read your mind. So it's good for everyone on your team if the person who understands the process best is the one who articulates what success looks like. Second reason, and this is something I experienced myself when I sat down to capture the Freelance Cake community launch process, writing out this success statement sharpened my thinking. I found that when I took the time to write it out and define what success looked like, that these launches, in order to be successful, would need to be carefully measured. Because if I hope to reuse the process, the only way the process is going to get better is if I have carefully measured everything so that after a launch is finished, I can look back at the launch. I can say what went well, what didn't go well. I can discard the things that didn't go well or iterate them. The things that did go well, I will make sure to carry those forward. I need measurement to have continuous improvement. My point is, after defining what success looks like, I created a different process. So if I hadn't written out that success statement and said, this is what success looks like, I would have ended up with a different process, a worse process. So even if you think you know your processes, you just need to write them down. Writing out a success statement will help you create better processes. Step number 8, this is the one that finally feels like you're doing something about your processes. Make a checklist of steps. I would encourage you to cheat. And by cheat, I mean open the voice memos app on your phone, start a new voice memo, talk out your process, take the transcript, drop that into a page in your knowledge base. Like I said earlier, I use Notion. I cleaned up the transcripts, and lo and behold, I had the first draft of my process. I saved a ton of time simply by talking out the first draft of my process rather than trying to type it out. Number 9, explain why each step matters. But if you already know why each step matters, why would you bother to add the rationale to your process? Again, you may delegate later. And again, you may find that if you take the time to make your invisible knowledge and decisions visible by putting your rationale into the process, you will sharpen your own thinking, you will make better processes, and you will make things easier for your team later on. You have to pull back the curtain on your thinking. If you are the expert in this process and you know what the outcome is supposed to be, and you know what steps lead to that outcome, but someone else may eventually run the process, they may be tempted to skip over steps that are inconvenient or time consuming. But if you give them a chance to exercise their own better judgment by adding the rationale, the why, then they're more likely to adhere to the process. Then the team is more likely to get the predictable results. So make sure you pull back the curtain, invite people into how you think, how you make decisions, why each step is important. And sure enough, your processes will be better, your results will be better. Last step, and then we'll start to end. Link out to anything required to run the process. In my case, with the launch process, I link out to a folder full of examples of other people's launch emails. Think of it as a place for ready-made inspiration. All I have to do is go just browse through those examples and think, oh, I love how they treated that testimonial, or oh, I wouldn't have thought to do a fast action bonus right there, or ooh, it's really smart to have that opt-out link, whatever, right? Why wouldn't I link out to the templates, the exercises, the examples, the screenshots? Of course, you can also just embed screenshots and embed videos right there, but you get what I'm saying. Everything that is required to run the process well, make sure it's built into the process. So that brings me to 3 tips or best practices. I already kind of covered the first one. Do everything you can to make it easier to adhere to a process than deviate from it. So if all the tools are right there, great. You've made it easier, and you're going to get better, more consistent results. If people actually use the process, they'll use the process. If it's easier to use the process, James Clear talks about this in Atomic Habits. If you want better habits, then you need to make the different habits easier, and you need to make the habits that you don't want harder. All right. Second, define your processes in a knowledge base first. So you capture all the steps, right? And then you go and you look for the tools and platforms that you use to actually run the process. So, for example, let's say you have all of your project management processes in Notion. That makes a lot of sense. Hey, let's define them over here first, rather than going to Monday or ClickUp or Moxie or some of the other project management tools. Why would you define them in your knowledge base first and then build them where work happens later? Well, if you go straight over to the tools and the platforms without knowing how you want to work, you're going to contort yourself to fit that platform or tool. And you may eventually become so frustrated, it feels so unnatural to you to use that platform or tool that you eventually leave. Ugh, right? It's better to define everything here in your knowledge base first. Then you take that process, you take it over to the tool or platform, and you say, will this platform let me work the way I want to work? Yes or no? Or maybe it's a yes, but we have to change it slightly. You're like, okay, I'm willing to make that compromise, but now the compromise is conscious. It's very different than when you just, change the shape of the way you work to fit somebody else's tool. And eventually you just have to ditch that tool and find a different one. So define processes first, build them where the work happens second. I already mentioned cheating. You can cheat with voice memos. You can cheat with screen capture videos. You can use tools like Scribe that record what you're doing on screen and then create a written doc for you that includes screenshots, that includes videos. You can use ChatGPT. But with ChatGPT, if you haven't defined that success statement and then turn that success statement into a prompt, you're not going to get great processes from ChatGPT. So, yet again, let me just underscore, you have to explain what success looks like before you're going to get good results from ChatGPT. You can delegate, hire other people. You can use templates. But you need to know what you want the template to do. You have to define the process in your knowledge base first. Otherwise, just like with a tool, any other tool or platform, you'll be changing the way you work to fit a template that may ultimately lead to frustration. So here are those steps again. And let me end with one little story. So I bought an investment property, and being a super proactive investment property owner, I noticed that the downspout did not have an extension pipe. So I took myself to Home Depot, paid $14 for my extension pipe, came back to the building, put the extension pipe on the downspout, had my fists on my hips, and said, "Look at me. I'm making improvements at the building." Anyway, my friend Dennis came over to do like an inspection, and we're standing side by side in the parking lot with our fists on our hips, and he looks up at the side of the building. He said, "Huh, that downspout isn't actually connected to the gutters. Y'all, there was no water running through the downspout. There hadn't been water running through the downspout in years. I had to optimize trash." I've always loved this quote from Peter Drucker, famous management consultant. "There is nothing quite so useless as doing with great efficiency what should not be done at all." You know what shouldn't have been done at all? Putting an extension pipe on a downspout with no water running through it. So just keep in mind that before you go hog wild, you know, optimizing your processes, you might want to just subtract stuff, cut stuff that doesn't belong in your business in the first place. Systems aren't the only growth lever available to you. So you might actually want to use that fulcrum, that red triangle underneath, which is subtraction. You might want to use subtraction. You might want to rethink certain parts of your business before you start reaching for systems. For example, why would you start optimizing the processes for delivering a certain offer that should be cut out of your business entirely? So the question right now isn't which of my processes should I optimize, or it could be that, right? If systems is the lever you should be reaching for. The question could also be, which growth lever should be my focus right now? If it's not systems, then what? So if you want the worksheet that covers all of the steps I showed you, then email me and ask for it and tell me which of these growth levers is most important. And that, my friends, is it. Thank you. And yeah, if you want that worksheet, tell me which growth lever is most important right now. Party on.